Opatów. Time has clearly left its mark here. Over hundreds of years, rains and waters sculpted gullies and ravines in the earth's lows, giving the area an aura of secrecy and unparalleled beauty. These trees certainly don't remember the beginnings of Opatów. It was a long time ago, whence in these precipitous woods, with an abundance of animals, that the first human settlers constructed a provisional farm, carved through forests with primitive tools and planted grains. No doubt, the first farmstead arose somewhere on the side of these hills, defending access to those uninvited and proving simpler to defend in case of attack. These were times before Christ, before a new religion reached the people settling virgin land, all living in harmony with nature. For planting, sites near riverbanks and creeks were chosen. These water sources supplied not only water, they fulfilled an important function in transport and communication as well. They made communicating easier by providing opportunities to develop relations with neighbors and for the exchange of materials and supplies. The Łukawa River served this purpose in ancient times. Later, its name was changed to Opatówka. Beyond the bend of this river, which hundreds of years ago propelled considerably more water than today, arose on knolls the first and oldest settlements and fortified castles to defend them. Various drifters and buyers began to visit this most conveniently located place. Already in the Middle Ages, it fulfilled a very important economic, political, and military role. Jan Długosz, a 15th century historian and student of the king's court, cites that there were seemingly to be a castle constructed on the site. These and other interesting anecdotes will be revealed after a more thorough archaeological digging. The original left bank settlement was called Gminy. The name might be derived from the first settlers or to those faithful to the Catholic Church. Legends tie this name to a knight or even the bandit Gminy, who allegedly took a liking to these areas. What was, simply was. In Gminy, there arose a community church which served as the first parish in Opatów. Amidst many hills which seem to be joined together in a very picturesque setting is Opatów. Right bank, a site which proved to be well chosen, there is constructed a collegiate church, or basilica. We don't know who provided funding for this sanctuary. Even Jan Długosz did not possess closer information, and he was well acquainted with events during that time. Its longevity, should other sources of documentation prove lacking, can be confirmed by those mighty walls. The beautiful and thoughtful work of past master builders is evidenced on the interior and exterior parts of these walls. Most likely, the church was constructed per wishes of the then head of Sandomierski lands, Kazimierz Sprawiedliwy. Around the collegiate church, markets began to appear and became more popular with merchants than the more distant ones in Gminy. There arises the Oppidum Magnum Opatów, called Greater Opatów. Towards the end of the 13th century, perhaps before the year 1282, as many historical facts seem to confirm, Opatów receives a charter as a city. Just a bit earlier, in 1232, the area becomes the property of the bishops of Lubos and remains under their rule until 1514. This is King Kazimierz Sprawiedliwy, considered to be the founder of the Opatów Collegiate Church. In the 13th century, Tartar invaders unfortunately fail to bypass Opatów. In a Poland divided into parts, even battles amongst the aristocracy take place. Those were uncertain times, and secure hiding places really came in handy. Who and when came up with the idea that the earth under buildings is a most suitable shelter is an uncovered historical detail. Boring the earth begins and culminates in the building of cellars, cavities, and passageways. It so turned out that these hiding places could be used excellently as food processing and storage areas as well, well hidden from enemies and protected from the view of undesirable glances. Imagination propels us into seeing rows and rows of meats, sausages, and other delicacies hanging overhead in these cellars and passageways, and in innumerable barrels, fine wines aging. A constant temperature, just a few degrees above 0 centigrade, superbly preserved foodstuffs here. Perhaps we let our imaginations run a bit wild. This last scene consisted of school children. But these are the walls, full of might, full of history. Opatów was situated on important merchants' routes that ran from Great Poland to the Ukraine and from Latvia to Krakow, on further to Silesia and Hungary. It prospered through trade. Breweries supplied a high grade of beer and sold it in taverns and inns. Mills were working, workshops were everywhere, craftsmen, leather workers, metal shops, stores with dry goods. Documents note that Frederick, bishop in the mid-15th century, permitted the construction of a ratusz, or city hall, with stalls near it for saddlers, bakers, shoemakers, and housing for the tradesmen. The bishops who owned the city looked after it well. They supported trade and craftsmanship. The history of Opatów cites Stefan II as a particularly wise and sagacious man. So, in the markets, one could meet voyagers and noble citizens from lands far away. The markets rang out with Persian and Turkish fezzes, Greek and Armenian caps. These famous markets took place on days honoring Saints Marcin, Prokop, and Agnes. Civitas Magna. This is how Latin documents refer to Opatów. The city is visited by Kazimierz Wielki, Władysław Jagiełło, Kazimierz Jagiellończyk. Important political meetings and councils take place here. At the end of the 15th century, Opatów sees growth and development blossom to splendid proportions and prosperity. War breaks out in the east and south of the kingdom. The Tartars during King Jan Olbracht's reign burned Opatów and many other villages and settlements to the ground. September 1502 sees a calamitous turn for the worse. An ensuing Tartar invasion sees havoc wreaked. They destroy the collegiate church, library with its rare manuscripts, pilfer priceless jewels and baubles. Those who survive are taken into captivity. The invaders are resisted by well-fortified and stocked Bernardine cloister. At the end of the 15th century, Opatów sees growth and development blossom to splendid proportions and prosperity. War breaks out in the east and south of the kingdom. The Tartars, during King Jan Olbrach's reign, burned Opatów and many other villages and settlements to the ground. September 1502 sees a calamitous turn for the worse. An ensuing Tartar invasion sees havoc being wreaked. The Tartars destroy the collegiate church, the library with its rare manuscripts. They pilfer priceless jewels and baubles. Those who survive are taken into captivity. The invaders are resisted by the well-fortified and stocked Bernardine cloister. Jan the monk fought gallantly, killing the Tartar leader from a tower high above the fighting. The attacks lasted for 4 days, and the invaders were successfully turned back. The Tartars, whose numbers included 30,000 strong, destroyed the Podole and Rush. Yarosław, Rzeszów, and the Sandomierski lands were also destroyed. So notes a chronicler of the period. The devastated city is left in smoldering ruins, fled by even those who miraculously somehow escape the slaughter. King Alexander Jagiellończyk exempts Opatowians from taxes and fees. After great calamities, prosperity returns. Krzysztof Szydłowski is permitted to buy for 10,000 red zlotys Opatów and its environs from the bishops in 1514, following the Tartar destruction. The new owner is at the time one of Poland's richest citizens, friend and colleague of Zygmunt the Elder, Chancellor of the Great Kingdom. The city owes much to him. He brought the city to full bloom. Walls and gates were built. The welfare of the citizens he looked after. Water was piped in. New privileges were amended for the basilica and are announced on exceptionally beautiful parchment, richly decorated with plants and the figures of Saint marching on horseback with a kneeling Szydłowski. Opatów is rebuilding quickly with the efforts of Krzysztof Szydłowski. It participates actively in trade with many cities, Sandomierz, Warsaw, Wilno, Gdańsk, Kraków, and others are principal trading partners. It competes with Sandomierz for the privileges of being a depositorium salis et alecum, or viewing for the right to store salt and herring. When the local gentry is in need of something, they travel to Opatów, some from far away, or they send for Jewish merchants who began settling here in the 16th century. Again in the 17th and 18th centuries, the city is visited by wars, calamities, epidemics, and fires. People's possessions gathered over generations are destroyed. The republic's might began to falter. Opatów loses its influence as an economic center, as do many other locales. Opatów was considered to be one of the most important agricultural and political centers. From the 15th century till the fall of the Republic, the city is host to council meetings of the aristocracy that are held in St. Martin's Collegiate Church. There were no objections to holding these meetings in church, and it was considered an everyday occurrence. The house of God was to halt animosities. Council meetings brought commerce into Opatów as well. Opatów cared for its guests. The aristocracy, in turn, took care of the local citizens. King Jan III Sobieski, bathed in glory after his victory in Vienna, stayed here. Frequently visiting Opatów, always sincerely welcomed were Stanisław August Poniatowski and his entourage. After the fall of the Republic, the city found itself under Russian annexation. Opatovians could not accept their loss of freedom and independence. They fought gallantly during the January uprising. February 21st, 1864, divisions from Krakow and Sandomierz attacked Russian and defended Opatów. The city was aflame. Casings flew skywards. Sparks burned black from smoke and soldiers' ashes. So it is noted. After the January uprising, the city falls to role of local administrative and service center. And to think that it was once called the beautiful and populated great city of Opatów. Both world wars leave their mark here as well. The Second World War proved especially bloody. Shootings, deportations, concentration camps. Opatovians battled their occupiers. They formed armed units. Much combat was seen. There arose conspiratorial political organizations and social ones as well, bringing aid to their fellow countrymen. Education was organized in secrecy. The city was seriously damaged during the war years, and, as once before, it arose from the ruins. The Peasants' Battalion Monument recalls the calling together of an armed peasants' organization in 1940. Who can recall that in 1850, nearly 4,400 people lived here, mostly in wooden houses? A chronicler cites that the people concerned themselves mostly with farming. They had quality soil of a first-class grade that produced a well-known grain known by its name, Opatów. There were 12 annual fairs. Over 300 craftsmen lived and worked here. There was a soap factory, tallow candle factory, and ones producing pins and needles. Linen and lacework were carried out here as well. Civitas Magna Opatów is situated in a picturesque setting amidst the world's only plateau, as Stefan Żeromski wrote. Charming in every season, the past is intertwined with the present. A statue of Leszek Czarny commemorates granting city status to Opatów towards the end of the 18th century. The city's teachers who undertook risk to conduct instruction in secrecy is remembered by the obelisk in front of the high school. A plaque recalls the freeing of hundreds of prisoners by the Armia Krajowa. The library has been named in honor of a native son, poet and writer Stanisław Czernik. A traveler collecting antiquities notes that a magnificent church of stone in the shape of a cross stands proudly here. St. Marcin's Collegiate Church is one of the most extraordinary Roman works of art in Poland and Europe. It was constructed during the second half of the 12th century. A basilica with transept and transverse nave, double facade, a presbyterium facing west. Many have written of its beauty and might. On a bed of velvety grass rises one of the most real examples of the house of God. A raw sanctuary, Queen of Poland sanctuaries, straight lines across stone, Roman windows, tall and tiny, two remarkable columns. The church's activities are inseparable from that of the city. It was destroyed, burned, rebuilt, restored, as the city itself. Despite late Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque influences and transformations, the Opatów Basilica retained its original Roman style. The main entrance portal, the oldest Roman, offset with timpani. The inside, Gothic, installed in the second half of the 15th century. I feel very involved with this architecture. The entrance makes no particular impression. There's nothing there. But that double stone arch, one on the outside, the other leading to the sanctuary. Simple, beautiful, and peaceful harmony here. There's nothing extraordinary in this portal. Total naked simplicity. Polish workers built it with Polish stone. Those flat steps that lead you inside are so very Polish. They have a medieval, local, Polish character to them. The cathedral is built with stone elements precisely cut and fit. Bas-relief in Roman frieze with a theme of four-leaf clovers and dragons and monsters. Wall paintings from the end of the 15th century. The crucifixion, emanating from it, is the drama of Christ and his followers, that they suffer at this cruel and agonizing event. The work was painted in paints which have lost their luster and color. Gothic painting develops in Poland in the 15th century due to the work inside of churches. Most artists, however, remain anonymous. The nave vaulting from the first half of the 16th century, late Gothic, cradling covered with a net of ribs and with keystone rosettes. An illuministic baroque polychrome realized in several phases during the 18th century by various artists covers it. Over the arches are coats of arms belonging to the owners of Opatów and Sandomierz County. In medieval Opatów, the clergy gathered at the collegiate fulfilled an important role in intellectual and cultural life. There existed a school from which emerged many students who later enrolled at Jagiellonian University. In the 15th century, there were 40 from here. That same century, the town's pride and joy was the famous mathematician and astronomer Wojciech from Opatów, professor at the university at Bologna. During the 16th and 17th century, the town's name gained further repute through Adam Opatowczyk, theologian and lecturer at Jagiellonian University. Also, Alexander Czechowicz, author of Pride of the World and Joy of Sinners is the Messiah's Mother. Many works of art were copied here as well. Opatów conservator Wojciech Górny from Tarnów copied Herman Minority's Flores Temporum, a popular chronicle of the papal and monarchical decline, said he did so to have the pleasure of reading about the deeds of our forefathers to recall the worthy. A tremendous library, medieval and more contemporary works, contains extraordinarily rare manuscripts, publications, and volumes of books. It succumbed to destruction and pilferage. The Opatów Collegiate's patron is Saint Martin from Tours. This 18th century polychrome in the transverse nave portrays scenes from his life and accomplishments. Glorification of the Holy, crowned with palmy thorns, Holy is a good shepherd on earth, worthy of praise in heaven. Polychromes in the transept and presbyterium, also heralding from the late Baroque period, are rather atypical of decorative work found in sanctuaries. Historic battle scenes depict the glorious past leaning towards the fall of the Republic. Famous shows of Polish strength at Vienna over the Turks, at Grunwald and Pszepole over the Teutonic Knights and Germans. Not without reason did the aristocracy gather at the Collegiata for local governing meetings. Not without reason did the aristocracy gather at the collegiate church for local governing meetings. The Szydłowiecki monument, they were the owners of Opatów and its environs. It's an outstanding piece from the Renaissance, completed after the death of Krzysztof from Szydłowiec. The central piece depicts the chancellor lying down, surrounding himself with the pomp and splendor of the magnates. He most certainly did not neglect to provide directives prior to his death as to the type of tribute to his glory and line should be sounded. His figure, with coat of arms ring on right hand and sword in left, reminds us of an Italian condottieri. Precise details of his face were obtained by means of posthumous masking. He died in Krakow in 1532. His remains were removed to Opatów and homage was paid there. A bas-relief, the Opatów lamenting, author unknown, an extraordinary piece of Polish art, magnificent, mysterious, and intriguing. It depicts the collective suffering of 41 figures following the death of Krzysztof Szydłowski, commissioned by his son-in-law, Hetman Jan Tarnowski. In Szydłowiecki's Liber Genesos, talk is of feelings, feelings bestowed on the chancellor not only by monarchs, humanists, the learned, but the whole nation. This monument reflects his esteemed position in Poland during her golden period. Szydłowski's children are laid to rest in the basilica as well. Their tombstones are eloquent humanistic tributes. Anna's monument. She died at 14, sculpted from red Hungarian marble, a portrait of the young noble full of grace and eloquence. Thoughts of dreams ring out, not death. Amidst valuable works of art, canonical stalls, richly carved about 1730, pews in late Baroque from 1722, decorated gently with plant ornaments, Latin dictums, and coats of arms. Such a strange building, it talks. How much it has already told me in its silence. It's told me a magnificent tale, starting with Prince Henry Sandomierski, an accounting of the Opatów lamenting the history of the battle in 1863 fought brilliantly by Polish insurgents, and the defeat of Hitler's armies, all the way up to the present. Jarosław Iwaszkiewicz wrote in Travels to Poland, "The collegiate church in Opatów I always associated with my first impression, which is the magnitude of the building. Not the tremendous interior, not the magnificent Opatów lamenting, a masterpiece of Polish sculpture, but it was rather the magnificent stone exterior of this building." 4 gates defended Opatów: the Krakow, the Sandomierski, the Lublin, the Warsaw. The Warsaw Gate was nearest to the basilica and was responsible for its defense. Krzysztof Szydłowski obligated the citizens of Opatów with the duty of repairing the walls and towers, allocating for this purpose funds from receipts from workshops, markets, rents, and court penalty fees. From walls dating back to the 16th century, which once surrounded the city, only small fragments remain and have been rebuilt. The Bernardine Church and Cloister of the Lesser Brothers, brought to Opatów in 1469, they settled next to the Church of the Holiest Virgin Mary, already built in the 12th century, in the oldest part of town known as Zimgrod. Solidly fortified, they resisted the Tartars in 1502. The Bernardines conducted a seminary. They procured a valuable library and actively joined the January uprising. For their aid and sympathy, the Tsarist rulers dissolve the cloister. The Bernardines returned to Opatów in 1939, occupying a totally destroyed cloister and sanctuary. The church, constructed in the early Middle Ages, was rebuilt several times, initially in the Gothic style, later in the Baroque style. The 18th century interiors create a harmonious whole with the polychromes and the interior architecture. The primary adornment of this great church is the magnificently large altar with gold-gilded pillars, in which is housed a portrait of the Virgin Mary's Annunciation. Rococo sculpture of Saints Bonaventure and Peter from Alexandria adorn the altar. A 17th century of Christ executed by Mache, making clearer a complicated theological concept. The indelible beauty of the sanctuary's interiors were influenced by Baroque and Rococo styling. During the second half of the 18th century, Feliana Reklewska, the vice-chancellor, had the church painted al fresco at her own expense. The late Baroque polychrome depicts scenes from the life of Mary, patron of the church. Gothic sculpture of Christ's crucifixion. The church's facade, late Baroque, three-tiered, two-storied. This is how Opatów looks with a Roman basilica. A group of Bernardine monks, an urbanistic architectural system, in a shape formed over hundreds of years. The building poses a riddle. Lack of historical sources concerning it. It's thought that it arose at the end of the 16th century. It's unknown who and for whom it was constructed. It's contemporarily thought of as Ratusz, or City Hall, seat of local government. Ostensibly, they housed Russian barracks and a military Orthodox church once. It was rebuilt according to its original plans. An unusually interesting detail is the pillar arcade. Once bored in the rock gullies below buildings, streets, and squares, cellars and underground passages would have been forgotten if not for the water leaking from pipes, permeating the earth's layer. An old foundation, oftentimes 2 or 3 stories deep, began to fall. When efforts to alleviate the danger were made, it was revealed that a second city existed, lying underground, built over a 100-year period. A large labyrinth of cells, cellars, passageways, virtually unknown. During the war, the Armia Krajowa conducted target practice in certain rooms. Attempts to rescue Opatów began in 1977. The Academy of Mining and Krakow undertook planning and management. Operations, professional craftsmen from Bytom are involved. The most interesting underground passages have remained and are open to tourists. Great emotions accompany the visitors. Some claim sounds emanate from other worlds beyond. The underground passages reveal their own presence. Just as in 1989, while filming this picture, an avalanche threatened the structure. Miners came to the rescue. Rescuing efforts on behalf of the old city group of Opatów. Walls are cracking and crumbling. Where underground cells and cellars were eliminated, arising are new style buildings. Certainly, reconstruction is not the point here. People live here now. Various institutions are provided office space. There's much more to do. In time, dilapidated Opatów will be like new. The ravages of time also weakened the art. The Roman basilica, dating back to the beginning of the 12th century, is threatened. A tower has been scaffolded. Fractures have appeared in the sanctuary's interiors. Cracks are visible on the walls. It's true that a few years ago, a plan to save the most treasured buildings in Opatów were devised, but funds to realize it have been lacking. Immediate help is necessary. Danger also threatens the group of Bernardine fathers, they who so gallantly braved Tartar invaders, who with painstaking labor raised it from near ruins. The ancient monastery buildings have been reconditioned with piety. The defense wall was renovated, but that's not enough. Time can't wait. As with the basilica, a plan has been devised to save it. There is not a lack of people eager to undertake a rescue mission, but there is a lack of money. This was once a city of princes, bishops, nobility, and it was private. The Szydłowieckis, the Tarnowskis, the Ostrogowskis, the Radziwiłłów, the Wiśniowieckis, the Sanguszków, the Lubomirskis, and the Potockis. Now, the decaying stones of the broad square recall the multilingual crowds of Greeks, Armenians, Turks, and Persians. The huge blocks of the city's gates help to recall the noble figure of the city's second founder, Krzysztof Szydłowiecki. The venerable Roman walls of the collegiate church have not forgotten the deliberations amongst the nobilities there. The bustle of leaves on spreading branches speak of tales of the fabulous processions of Kings Jagiełło, Jan III, and Stanisław August. Amidst untold hills on the Łukawa River, known before as the Opatówka, winds from the north through valleys, Opatów.